On a Prayer, Faith is Awaken by Elton Thomas. Episode 18, Breaking the Silence. The newsroom hummed with the energy of a looming deadline, the constant clatter of keyboards mixing with the murmur of reporters exchanging hurried conversations. Phones rang, screens flashed, and the unmistakable scent of burnt coffee hung in the air. In the center of it all sat Megan Lee, her brow furrowed in concentration as she scrolled through the latest batch of documents spread out across her desk. She had been working on this story for weeks, and every piece of information she uncovered about Jackson Browne's human trafficking empire made her stomach twist with a mix of anger and dread. The deeper she dug, the more monstrous the operation revealed itself to be, an intricate web of corruption and exploitation that reached far beyond the dark alleyways of St. Louis. Megan had exposed crime before, but nothing like this. Her fingers flew over the keyboard, her eyes scanning the screen as she drafted the latest segment of the exposé. The story had started small, a missing girl, whispers of an underground trafficking ring, but now it had grown into something much bigger. Megan had rallied her colleagues, pushing the story to the forefront of every local news station, and the public was beginning to pay attention. The pressure was mounting, and Jackson's empire was starting to crack. But with every step closer to the truth, Megan could feel the danger closing in around her. She glanced at the clock on the wall, nearly midnight. The newsroom had emptied out for the night, leaving only a handful of late-shift reporters and editors working quietly at their desks. Megan rubbed her temples, exhaustion creeping into her bones, but she couldn't afford to stop. Not now. Not when she was so close. Her phone buzzed beside her, the sudden noise jolting her out of her thoughts. Megan reached for it, her heart skipping a beat when she saw the message. "Be careful. They know." It was from one of her anonymous sources, someone on the inside of Jackson's operation who had been feeding her information for weeks. The warning sent a chill down her spine. They knew. Megan's hands trembled as she placed the phone back on the desk. She had known from the beginning that exposing Jackson Browne would come with risks, but this felt different. This felt personal. Jackson knew she was closing in, and now he was coming after her. Her thoughts immediately turned to Dusty. He had been in the thick of this investigation for even longer than she had, risking his life to find Mila and bring down Jackson. Megan knew Dusty was capable, more than capable, but the fear that something could happen to him gnawed at her, and now she was in danger too. Megan's gaze flicked to the door of the newsroom, the silence suddenly oppressive. She stood up, grabbing her coat and the stack of files on her desk. She needed to get out of here, get somewhere safe. The darkness outside the large windows felt like a living thing, pressing against the glass as if waiting for her to step into it. As Megan made her way toward the exit, her heart pounded in her chest, the silence of the empty newsroom making every sound feel amplified. She reached the stairwell, her footsteps echoing as she descended, each step bringing her closer to the cold night outside. Her breath came in shallow bursts, her instincts telling her that something was wrong. The moment she stepped out onto the street, she knew she wasn't alone. Two figures emerged from the shadows, their faces obscured by the hoods of their jackets. Megan's pulse quickened as she glanced around, realizing too late that the streets were deserted. No witnesses, no help. She clutched the files tighter against her chest, her eyes darting toward her car parked across the street. But the men were already moving toward her, their intentions clear in the way they walked. Calculated, deliberate, predatory. Megan's heart raced as she fumbled for her phone, trying to dial Dusty, but before she could even bring it to her ear, one of the men lunged toward her, knocking the phone from her hand. It clattered to the ground, the screen lighting up briefly before going dark. She stumbled back, her mind racing, fear clawing at her insides. She had faced dangerous situations before, but nothing like this. The men closed in, their faces twisted into menacing sneers. One of them reached for her, his hand rough as it grabbed her arm, and then everything changed. Megan barely had time to register the shift in the air before Dusty appeared out of nowhere, his body moving faster than she thought possible. One moment, she was trapped in the grip of Jackson's men, and the next, Dusty was there, standing between her and the danger, his eyes blazing with an intensity that sent chills down her spine. The men froze, their faces contorting in confusion and fear as they realized who they were up against. But Dusty didn't hesitate. His movements were a blur, faster than Megan had ever seen. He disarmed one of the men in a single fluid motion, knocking him to the ground with a force that seemed almost superhuman. The second man lunged at Dusty, but he moved with such speed and precision that the attack seemed almost comical in comparison. Dusty dodged, his body twisting gracefully out of the way before delivering a swift kick that sent the man sprawling into the street. Megan's heart pounded in her chest as she watched the scene unfold. Dusty wasn't just fighting. He was moving with a power, a strength, that she couldn't explain. His actions were too fast, too precise, as if he were tapping into something beyond himself. The men scrambled to their feet, terror flashing across their faces as they realized they were no match for him. They turned and fled into the night, their footsteps echoing in the empty streets. Megan let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, her body trembling as she watched them disappear. But her eyes quickly shifted back to Dusty, who stood there, his chest heaving, his eyes still glowing with that strange, otherworldly light. "Dusty," Megan whispered, her voice shaky. He turned to her, and for the first time, she saw the uncertainty in his eyes, the same confusion and disbelief that she felt. Dusty's hands flexed at his sides, as if he were trying to make sense of what had just happened, as if he couldn't quite believe it himself. I don't know how I did that," Dusty admitted, his voice low, almost incredulous. Megan took a step toward him, her heart pounding for a different reason now. She had seen miracles before, but this was something else. Dusty wasn't just surviving. He was changing. "Dusty," she said softly, her voice filled with awe. I think it's more than just you." Dusty frowned, his brow furrowing in confusion. "What do you mean?" Megan swallowed hard, her mind racing as she tried to put into words what she had felt deep inside. She had been praying for Dusty's safety, had been praying that he would make it in time to save her. And somehow, she knew those prayers had been answered. "I prayed for you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I prayed that you'd find me, that you'd be able to stop them. And you did." Dusty shook his head, his expression torn between disbelief and something deeper, something that scared him. "Megan, I don't know what's happening to me. It's like I'm not in control anymore, like something else is taking over." Megan's heart ached at the fear in his voice, but she knew, without a doubt, that something powerful was at play. And in that moment, standing in the cold night air, she made a choice. She closed her eyes, her hands trembling as she clasped them together, and began to pray. "Lord, protect Dusty. Give him the strength he needs to keep fighting, to keep going. Let him know that he is not alone, that you are with him." As Megan's voice filled the quiet night, something changed. The air around them seemed to hum with energy, and Dusty's eyes widened as he felt a strange sensation, something lifting him, something pulling him upward. His feet left the ground, and before he could comprehend what was happening, he was levitating. Megan's breath caught in her throat as she opened her eyes, watching in awe as Dusty hovered above the ground, his body surrounded by an ethereal glow. Tears filled her eyes as she realized the power of her prayers, the strength of her faith. Dusty's body trembled with the force of it, his mind reeling as he tried to make sense of what was happening. But in that moment, he understood. There was something greater at work, something beyond him, something guiding him. Megan's voice broke through the haze, soft but steady. "It's not just you, Dusty. You're part of something bigger." Dusty's heart pounded in his chest as he slowly descended, his feet touching the ground once more. He stood there, his body still buzzing with the energy of what had just happened, his mind racing. He wasn't sure what to believe anymore, but one thing was clear. He wasn't in this fight alone, and for the first time, he was ready to accept that.